Hello and good morning to everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Realities and Possibilities. We are excited for today's webinar and so glad that you could join us today. I'm assuming that most of our guests are from Saskatchewan, maybe some people from other places as well. Let us know in the chat box where are you joining in from. And meanwhile, I would like to inform all participants that their microphones are muted. And if you have any questions you would like to be addressed after the presentation, please use the Q&A box. It should be located in your Zoom taskbar at the bottom of your Zoom window. The chat box is also available if you have any comments or technical questions. So yeah, please feel free to use that as well. And I would also like to mention that we are recording this webinar, so please feel free to share this information with any of your friends and people who may not have been able to participate in today. The recording should be up on our website like within a couple of weeks or so. So yeah, please feel free to share the information. I will also be sending an evaluation link after the webinar and will request you all to help me out by completing it, as it really helps us to determine the focus and format of our programming and webinar, and it allows us to better support you as our professionals in this field. And so before we dive into the introductions and the webinar, I would acknowledge that across Canada, we live on various treaty territories and traditional meeting grounds and homes of Indigenous people and Métis people. And I, Soumya Mishra, and my colleague Anna Entrade, the FASD Prevention Program coordinators with the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, are hosting this webinar from Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis people. At the Prevention Institute, our goal is healthy children. The Prevention Institute is a non-profit organization that works to reduce the occurrence of disabling conditions in children, including the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. The Prevention Institute raises awareness by providing training, information, and resources based on current best evidences. We believe that all children, regardless of ability, have the right to the best physical, social, and emotional health possible. Our program includes maternal and infant health, early childhood mental health, child injury prevention, child traffic safety, nobody's perfect parenting, sexual and reproductive health, and fetal alcohol spectrum disorder prevention. You can also visit our website, www.skprevention.ca, to learn more about the work that we do. And now it's my sincere pleasure to welcome our speaker for today, Myles Himmelreich. Hello, Myles.
Hello.
And first, I would like to give a little bit of introduction. Myles is a member of the Adult Leadership Committee. He's a very well-known national and international consultant and trainer on FASD. He brings his personal experiences of what it's like having a disability that has so much negativity and stigma attached to it. By sharing an inside perspective, he helps the society to better understand and normalize the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. In this webinar, you will also learn some of the tools and technique that has helped Myles in his personal life. Thank you once again for everyone for joining, and thank you, Myles. And I will pass it over to you.
All right. Thank you. I'm just gonna quickly turn on my don't disturb because I am very disturbed. No, just kidding. Okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity. This is my first of about 3 or 4 presentations I'm doing this month. So I'm really excited to start getting into talking, and the cool thing about this is also too, your guys' shirt here, and it says FASD, let's change the conversation. I think that's really a good way to start things, because when we talk about FASD, quite often I find that people have heard about it, know something about it, but I also find too that there's a lot of misinformation that they have, and also too that a lot of the information that they have is negative, right? And with FASD, like you're saying, a lot of stigma, shame, and blame comes with FASD, and that's from the lack of information and the wrong information, right? So changing the conversation doesn't mean that we are not talking about FASD or that we are trying to not have FASD around, right? So what we really need to do is change that conversation so that we can better educate people. So September 9th is International FASD Day, the 9th day of the 9th month. And it is something that is celebrated every year all around the world. For me, I remember going to FASD events years ago, and they were pretty, I don't know, they're just pretty kind of glum, and you'd have a little thing where somebody would talk and say, this is FASD, and then it just really wasn't a lot to it, and it was kind of more quiet and kind of glum looking, right? And now we do things like we celebrate it, right? And we have walks and we have all these different things all around the world that people are doing to acknowledge individuals with FASD. And I love that, because that is what helps change the conversation from, oh, they're victims who suffer, to look at how hard you work every day to do what seems for many other people something simple, right? And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand the effort that puts in to be an individual with FASD. Many times as I've gotten older over the years, now I know I don't want to confuse anyone. I know I look like I'm 20, but I'm a little older than that. But to understand FASD was really important for myself. I always say that once I understood, made sense, and became accepting of my FASD diagnosis, then I was able to understand, make sense, and become accepting of myself. Those things for me that were just normal, I've learned over the years that not everybody is in constant pain, and not everybody struggles with lights and smells and sounds, right? And so as I've learned this information over the years, it's really helped me to be able to go from somebody with FASD who all this stuff is going on, to someone who is resilient, who has FASD, but has also found ways to incorporate techniques and strategies to get through day-to-day things, right? So when I talk about, one of the things with FASD that we talk about is sensory. So for me, I have heightened sensory issues. So that means that smell, touch, hearing, seeing, tasting, all of those sensories that we all have, for me, are heightened to the point where it's physically uncomfortable. So there'll be smells that I can smell, and a lot of times other people can't smell them, but it will physically hurt. Or certain noises, like little noises or whatever, they actually are physically uncomfortable. And growing up, I knew that certain things hurt, but I didn't connect it to my sensory issues. I just knew I didn't like loud noises and certain smells, right? It wasn't until I started understanding about the sensory issues and understanding that it's something that can be very common for individuals with FASD, is to have those heightened sensory issues. It's been really funny, spending time with, I've got a number of friends and colleagues that also have FASD, and we'll just talk about those things that we face every day, and it's funny because I'll be like, oh, do you guys ever smell something and no one else smells it? It just smells so bad. And it's like, oh my goodness, yes. Right. And you're like, oh, another thing that we would do is, we'd meet at these conferences and we're spending time together. And as we learn more about how FASD is a whole body diagnosis, how it affects our bones and our muscles and everything like that. I remember being like, oh, my elbow cracks all the time. And then someone's like, my knee cracks all the time. So then we'd kind of jokingly, every time we met, we'd have like what we called a crack off. How much of you can crack while you're walking? You know, so, but that again is another example where my whole life I've had struggles with walking upstairs. My knees have hurt, my hips have hurt, those kind of things. And because that was my normal, I didn't know to say, hey, mom and dad, can we go look at this with the doctor? Right? It was just, I just figured that's what it was. When I was able to be involved in the co-researching for FASD, the whole body diagnosis, that's where we started finding out that it seems like the development of our bones and muscles and joints and things like that are being affected. So what we found was, even though developmentally and intellectually, where our brain is developing maybe at a slower pace, our bodies seem to be developing and breaking down at a faster pace. So we found things like early onset dementia, which is classified around 60 years of age. We found a lot of individuals with FASD that had that were only in their 30s. We found that women reporting going through premenopause or full menopause in their 20s. I myself have osteoarthritis, hip dysplasia, scoliosis, a number of things. But again, for me, that's always been my normal. And we don't think, oh, when this 12-year-old kid is saying that his knees hurt, let's take him to the doctor and look for if he might have arthritis, right? When he's 12, it's like, no, he just has growing pains or whatever, right? So that was one of the reasons we did the survey, was to say, we need to start looking at these physical issues at a much younger age, because they are impacting us at a much younger age, but at a very high volume, right? So it's those kind of things that are basic conversations, saying, okay, so FASD affects the whole body. How can we help and support that? Right? FASD might be sensory issues. Once I was able to understand that for myself, then I was able to, self-advocate, because I could be out with friends and, I was able to say, it's kind of loud in here. Do you mind if we go somewhere else? Or, it's kind of, I can't really handle the smells. Do you mind if we go somewhere else? And more times than not, people are very accommodating and they're like, yeah, sure. Or I'll hear someone say, yeah, it is loud in here. I'd rather go somewhere else too. Right? So being able to normalize that conversation and know that, well, if I say it's too loud, is everybody in the room going to turn and point at me and laugh? Because that's what was always in my head, was this idea that, oh, everyone's going to laugh at you and pick on you and make fun of you. And the reason that I had that in my head was that's what happened for a long time throughout school. So of course, when you leave school and you've had these traumatic incidents happen, or these things that, kind of help guide your mindset, you bring that along with you and think, well, then I guess that's how it's always going to be, because everybody's going to look at me and think I'm weird and whatever, right? But then when I learned about normalizing the conversation, and when I learned that it was okay to self-advocate, then that's also when I learned too that, yeah, a lot of times people are just like, sure, yeah, we can do that. It's not this big, huge issue that I built it up to be in my head, right? So a lot of times when I share my personal story about having FASD, I find that quite often other individuals will have similar stories, where it's going through the foster care system, being adopted, being removed from family, whatever that is. That's quite often similar experience. And then going into school, similar experiences of not being supported, being labeled, and just not feeling like you fit in. For myself, I remember about grade 5 or 6 is where I started kind of realizing for myself that I just don't fit in like other people. I didn't know what it was, but there was something I knew that was different. When we look at FASD, it's not uncommon to find that, it's not uncommon to find that developmentally, you could be anywhere from 5 to 8 years difference developmentally than you are chronologically. So for me, when I was 16, 17, that's what the age on my birth certificate would say I am. But developmentally, the way that my brain worked and the way that I understood and did things was that of a 12-year-old. Right? But again, people don't necessarily see the disability, because when we think of a disability, we think of something that can be visually seen as something that's restricting, right? So maybe they're in a wheelchair, so you can see that maybe they have problems walking. Maybe they have a seeing eye dog, so maybe they have problems with their vision. Right? They have hearing aids, so maybe they have problems with hearing. And so society, we try to make it so that it's accessible for everybody to be in our communities, right? So maybe we hold the door open for the guy in the wheelchair. Maybe we talk a little bit louder for the guy with the hearing aids, or we kind of make sure to step out of the way when the person with the walking cane or the seeing eye dog is coming our way. But when it comes to FASD, nobody ever held the door open for me longer. Nobody ever talked louder. Nobody ever made those a little bit of changes to support me, because my disability didn't look like other ones, right? So we've said before that FASD is this invisible disability. And sometimes I kind of challenge that, because I don't know if it's as invisible as it is we're not understanding what we're seeing. Because what happens a lot of times is we'll see things that are connected with FASD, and we'll do the same things. It was always whatever I did was behavior, and then it was assumed as a bad behavior, and then I was given punishment. So whether that was that I'm not sitting still in my chair and I can't answer the question, so then I'm in trouble and I have detention, people would look at me and go, oh, there he is with his bad behavior. He's not listening. He's not paying attention. He's, coming in late. All of these things. Didn't have his homework done. Everything like that was seen as it was a behavior, but as a bad behavior. So we'll punish him to get it out of him. And to me, it's kind of interesting, because I think about all those hours and days and years I spent in detention, and teachers are walking past, looking at me, shaking their head, going, when is he going to learn? And the real question should be, when are you guys going to learn? Because when it comes to FASD, it's not about what I need to do differently or how I need to change. It's how those around me that are my supports, my friends, my family, it's about what they can do differently, right? So instead of just saying, okay, boom, put you in detention, maybe trying to figure out why it's hard for me to focus. If that's happening every day, all day, let's think about what else could be going on, right? Maybe if I'm constantly late, what else could be going on? Is it just that I'm being a bad kid and just being late? No. Now, I'm sure there's probably maybe one day where I acted up, probably just one day. But otherwise, I was a perfect kid and just misunderstood. Again, what becomes your norm is what you experience every day. So for me, every day I experienced getting up and going to this place where I was a failure, this place where I didn't fit in and I couldn't do the things like other people. right? So being told that you're not doing it fast enough, or you're not doing it as good, or those kind of things. So for years, I just didn't meet those expectations of people around me. So that's where those labels came in. And that's where, people were disappointed. But also, too, for me, that's where I kind of struggled, because I was like, I feel like I'm trying, but the results are all showing that I'm not. And everyone around me is saying that I'm not. So I guess if that's what they're saying, then that's what must be true. Because when we look at, police officers, we look at doctors, we look at teachers, people that specialize in those fields, we look up to them and we give them a certain amount of respect in the fact that they're well educated in their field. So obviously, if a police officer says this is the law and you can or can't do this, then you'd believe that. Obviously, when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, we got to follow up tests on this or that, you believe that. When it comes to a teacher and that teacher is telling you you're lazy because you never get to class on time, you never pay attention, you're not trying, you believe those things. Because again, we look at the teacher and go, well, they must know. So if this is what they're saying, then it must be true. It was really difficult in school when I could see that developmentally I was, quite a bit behind where the other kids were. But again, this was something that my brain and my ability to do certain things, it's not that I always couldn't do things. Sometimes it just would take me longer. I remember going from when I was in elementary school, I was in what was called a learning disability class, LD class. And for me, it was really good because we had 2 or so teachers and there's only about 8 or 10 kids. And so for me, I believe there's 2 to 3 keys to success when it comes to FASD. And the first 2 are routine and repetition. If I understand my day-to-day routine, and if I'm able to do things in repetition over and over again, I have a better chance of being able to be successful. Knowing that this is what my schedule for the day was going to look like really brought me a sense of comfort, because, okay, I can understand what I'm doing. I can make sense of my environment and it feels good. Okay, I've got this. And then that repetition of, okay, so when we're doing our math question, you do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 1, step 2, step 3. Now, I was fortunate because with the low number of kids and 2 teachers, we got a lot of one-on-one time, and we could go at a different pace, right? Maybe that's a slower pace for some things, regular pace for others, but it allowed for me to work at a pace that worked for me. And it allowed me to do the steps 2, 3, or 4 times, whatever it took for me to start understanding enough to be able to get some of that work done. So this was really good because I had that routine, I had that repetition, I was supported, and I was having some success. But one day I went into high school or junior high, and all of a sudden they integrated me into regular classrooms. So now here I am in a class full of 30, 35 kids, one teacher, and they give the assignment and the steps. And they say, okay, so you gotta do step 1, step 2, step 3, do the next 15 questions, take the other ones home. All this information that's coming in so fast. And I don't have time to say, sorry, can we go over that one question 4 or 5 more times, right? Because I don't understand. It became very easy to kind of allow myself to get lost in the class. So I was either looking like I was a class clown, or I started taking on that label of the kid that didn't care, or just kind of hide away in the back. because I didn't want anyone to see the truth. And for me, the truth was that I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't good enough, and I couldn't keep up to the other kids. In our life, we all face where people have judged us, where people have labeled us, and we'll say, oh, everyone always said I was too slow, or I was too big, or too small, or whatever it is. And I think when we look at these labels that we have on ourselves, sometimes these are labels put on us by friends, colleagues, family, teachers, people in the community. But also too, I think sometimes we put those labels on ourselves. Did someone actually walk up to you and say, you're too small, right? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Maybe it was your own thing where you're like, oh, too small, right? And then you put that label on, and we look at those labels as these are the things that define us, of who we are, right? And so we live our life going through every day saying, okay, if I'm to define myself, this is how I will define myself. I have a friend of mine, and it's guaranteed that every time we all hang out, he's going to make some joke about how he's so fat. And the thing is, like, he works out every day and he's in good shape and everything, but he has this label on him that he puts on every day and then brings attention to it, right? And so when you're getting all these labels and you're starting to, put the labels on yourself, it can be a lot to have to deal with, because you feel so judged and you feel like you're not good enough. More times than not, those labels that we put on ourselves, they're not positive ones. You don't necessarily wake up and go, huh, I'm amazing. Boom. Man, I'm really fast. I'll put that one on there. I am so smart. Boom. A lot of times we put on the label of, oh, great, didn't finish my homework. Obviously wasn't trying again. Oh, I'm late for school. Obviously I'm lazy. So for myself, when I started getting these labels and I started kind of getting lost in the classroom, is where I started realizing that I couldn't do things like the other kids, and I was different. But the most difficult part was I didn't know why, or I couldn't make sense of how I could change that. And what people didn't understand was that the frustrations that my parents had because I got up late and I was taking forever to get out the door and I was going to miss the bus, the frustrations that the other kids had, that I was annoying, I was immature, and I was silly and weird, the frustrations that the teachers had, that I was late for class, I didn't finish my homework, I'm not sitting still, I don't know the answer to the question. All of those frustrations they had, you'll have that frustration with me, and then I leave, and now your frustration with me is gone. But my frustration of, oh, man, why can I never get out on time? I always miss the bus. So I'm still carrying that frustration with me when I get to the playground and the kids laugh and then run away and don't want to play with me anymore. And I'm like, oh, why do I do that? Why do I act so silly and weird? And I'm so dumb. And then that frustration still is going on when I go into the class and I'm late for class and I don't have my homework done. Those frustrations and those feelings that people had around me and at me, what people didn't understand were things like the fact that those feelings and those frustrations were what I carried every day, all day long. And I think it's so important to understand that there were some things that seemed like simple little things that I had to work very hard for to make work for me, right? Being able to, take those experiences that I was having and being able to learn from them was something I was able to do, but it took until I was quite a bit older. Before then, I took those experiences and took them as, well, this is just defining who I am. Another thing that made things really difficult was when I'd be in the classroom and I was able to get the answer to some question. And I was able to do it and say we had 25 questions to answer. So we did as many as we could, and then we take it home for homework and say maybe that day I get 17 to 20 of them done. So I'm doing really, really good, right? And then the next day come back, okay, we got the same sheet. We have some more questions, but it's the same stuff. And teacher sits down and I go, I can't do this. And they're like, yes, you can. You just did it yesterday. That frustration that the teachers would have, that frustration that my parents would have when it was, okay, you can't say you don't know where your jacket and boots go because you put them away yesterday. So you should know where to put them. As frustrated as you were with me, can you imagine how frustrated I am with myself? Because here's the teacher going, you did this yesterday, you should be able to do it now. And here I am going, I did this yesterday, why can't I do this now? Right? But what I found was, as I got these labels and these experiences were happening, a lot of times it was easy to just kind of embrace those labels. If you want to say I'm the kid that's not trying, I don't care, sure. That's a lot easier to be labeled as, rather than if you peel that label away, you'll see that it's actually, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm not good enough, right? So I'll cover those up with not paying attention, class clown, whatever it was, right? As the years would go on, it got harder because that gap between where I was developmentally and chronologically became farther and farther apart. So my brain, the way I understood things, the things that I could do, stayed the same, but yet the expectations on me and the things I had to do changed and became greater. And so I got left farther and farther behind. Well, we'll put you forward just because you got 51%. So here we go, put you in the next class, right? And that was something that I've thought about before. And I've often thought, I wish I could go back to like junior high now, or even grade 5 or 6, because now I understand things differently. I know what works for me, and I can self-advocate. I know it's okay to go, sorry, can you tell me how to do that again? I've learned these things even through, my experiences at jobs. Is, I would so many times I'd be sitting at my desk at work, and I had to photocopy something, and I was really intimidated by the photocopier. Right, there's this big, massive machine that you can fax, you can photocopy, you can print, you can do all of these things with. But there's also a ton of different buttons and things that you got to use. So for me, it was very overwhelming. And for so long, I had pictured in my head that I would walk out and go to a colleague of mine and say, hey, can you help me with the photocopier? And I had a perfect vision in my head that that person would stop and look at everyone else in the office and go, hey guys, look, stop for a second. Look at Myles, he can't use the photocopier. And everybody would point at me and laugh. It was so real in my head that I didn't ask anyone to help me, or I wouldn't photocopy it, or I would say, oh, I forgot, or oh, I'll do it later, whatever it was, because of this fear that I built up in my head. But 10 out of 10 times when I'd go ask somebody, they were like, yeah, sure, I can help you. Or quite often too, people would say, you know what, I don't know how to use it either. But you know who does is so-and-so. I always go ask them to help me. Right? And it's like, oh, okay. And it wasn't this big thing that I built it up to be in my head. Right? So being able to understand that I can self-advocate and ask for supports. Being able to understand that I know what works for me, what doesn't work, And those things that don't work, I have a good understanding of why they're not working and what I could do to change that, right? So to be able to go back to school now and have that opportunity to go there with all of that information and all of that, personal belief in myself, and know that there are things I can do, but it might look a little bit different. Mhm. One of the things that I hear quite often is with kids in school, they'll talk about, oh, I remember, they put my desk in the hallway, or I've heard many times they put my desk in the coat room, and I actually liked it. And if you actually think about, so this is, we're going to get that kid out of the way here, put him in the hallway so he's not interrupting, or put him in the coat room so they're not, bugging anyone else, those kind of things. But what actually is happening is you're removing us from the environment that is not set up to work for us and not set up to support us to succeed. And now you're putting us in an environment where there's not as much noise, there's not as much distractions, there's not the opportunity for that sensory overload to take over everything that's happening. In the coat room, you can kind of look around, it's quieter. In the hallway, not as many people, so I could actually just focus on the work I need to do. And so that's where you hear, I actually liked it. I did better when I was there, right? But unfortunately, it was being used as a punishment, right? Instead of going, hey, this is actually helping them. I wonder how we can incorporate this into their day-to-day so that they can be successful, right? Being able to go back to school now and to be able to do the work and know that it's okay to say, sorry, can we go through those steps again? Or be able to say, okay, I just need a little bit more time. So I can do the first 3 steps. I know what to do there. And then after that, can I check in with you? And then we'll do the next steps. Knowing that it's okay to say that, knowing it's okay to advocate for myself. People very often will be like, yeah, sure. Yeah, just come back when you're done those and I'll help you. But I didn't feel like I could do that when I was in school. Right? One of the things that played a huge role in my life was, I remember even in grade 4 or 5, I lived across the street from the school. So it literally took me a couple minutes to get to school. But in grade 4 or 5 was where I really started seeing that I was quite often late for class. And it was frustrating because it didn't matter if I got up the day before and, had all my stuff put out and my lunch and my clothes and everything, or if I got up with 2 hours ahead of time, so I had plenty of time to get everything done. I always was late. Right? And then I went into junior high, and that became something that was even more constant, that I was always late. Because now it wasn't a couple minute walk to the junior high school. It was probably about half hour, 35 minutes. Constantly late for these things. And then fast forward, you're going to family events, and there's always that person that's always late for everything, right? And then you've got the ones that are always on time or ahead of time, and they think, oh, it's disrespectful to be late, so and so is always late, right? And again, what we don't understand is what's really going on. And I think this is a good example. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking that this is a good example of where we judge people negatively instead of stopping and going, what else could be going on? Or just accepting it, right? Like, why do you need to point out that so-and-so is always late? Why do you need to, I can tell from my own experience as a person that was quite often late and whatever, I'm trying as hard as I can, and I am so anxious and stressed by the time I get in that door to have somebody throw a comment out like, oh, well, look who's finally here. Trust me, you don't need to do that. I've been doing that to myself so much already, right? what we don't understand is what's going on that's causing me to be late. And this was something that I actually didn't really make sense of until I was in my early mid 30s. Again, I know I look like I'm 20. Thank you, thank you. But what I didn't realize was time is a abstract concept. So we have concrete and abstract. Concrete are things and ideas that make sense, that are solid, that we can see and we can understand. Right? So if I'm talking on my phone and I'm holding my phone, that's concrete. You can see me holding the phone, so you would assume that that's my phone. When we talk about abstract, those are things that we're supposed to be able to make sense of that we can't necessarily see. And so that's why things like time and money can be really big struggles when you have FASD. Also, too, emotions, because how do you say what, like, how do you show what love is? Right? You can show it through actions, but like that's not as concrete, right? So when it came to time, what would happen is I would wake up in the morning and I get out of bed and I kick the cat down the staircase, and my mom yells at me for kicking the cat, and I burn my toast and I spill my cereal and start running out the door. I can only find one of my shoes, and then I have to find my other shoe, and then I miss the bus, and then I get to school and I'm running in late and I don't have my homework done. These are all the experiences that that are happening to me. But what people don't understand is there are certain things that I'm experiencing and going through in all of those events. So for one of them, what made sense for me was when I finally realized that for years, we were told, okay, so we'll see you on Monday, be at school or be at work at this time. We'll say 9 o'clock, right? Monday rolls around, you're at home, and it's 7 a.m. and you have to be at work or school at 9. 7 a.m. Okay, fine. We're not late. We got plenty of time. It's 8 a.m. Okay, fine. We're not late. We got plenty of time. What would happen, and what still does happen for me, is I'm ready to go. I've got enough time. And so then I will go to get whatever pair of shoes that I want to wear that day. And then I'm like, you know what? Actually, these ones would look really good with white laces in them. I'm just going to switch them over because I've got plenty of time anyways. So then I go to the kitchen and I go to the junk drawer and I see, oh, there's the laces that I wanted. And I look on the counter and there's 2 bowls and a coffee cup. And I'm like, you know what? I might as well just throw them in the dishwasher for now. It's only going to take a second. I've got plenty of time. So I do that. And then I look at the counter and I'm like, oh, there's that 1 cup that I can't wash in the dishwasher. And I use it all the time. I might as well just quickly wash that out because I've got plenty of time. It's just going to take a second. So then I go do that. And then I come back and I'm getting my shoes on and I'm like, oh, actually, you know what would look really good with this whole outfit would be that new shirt I got. So I go and I go get that new shirt. It still has the tag on it. So I got to go and get the scissors and I use the scissors. And then I realize, why are some of the scissors in the junk drawer? And then some of the other scissors are in the utensil drawer. I might as well put them all together because they're all scissors. And I've got time. It's okay. It's only going to take a second. When somebody says, I'll meet up with you. Yeah, hold on. It's just going to take a second. How long is a second? Is a second the same amount of time when someone goes, oh, I'm just going to grab my coffee. I'll meet you outside in a second. Is that the same amount of time as when someone goes, oh, I'm just going to run to the washroom. I'll meet you out in a second. Nope, those are different. But again, those are things you can't see. They're abstract. And so I quite often will think, oh, I've got plenty of time. So now going back to the scenario of I have to be there at 9 o'clock. I'm at home at 7 o'clock. I'll still make it, it's fine. 8 o'clock, make it, it's fine. If I have to be there at 9 o'clock and I'm at home and it's 8:59, am I late? Nope. Am I going to be late? Yes. Because what I did not factor in was the 6-minute walk to the bus stop, the 12-minute bus stop ride, the 5-minute walk after that to the school or work. Whenever I was told what time to be wherever, that's all I was told, was when to be there. Nobody ever said, okay, we'll see you on Monday, leave your house at 8:03. That's the time I needed to focus on, was the time I need to leave, not the time I need to be there, because when I focus on the time I need to be there at 8:59, I still think I can make it. If I just run out the door really fast or whatever, right? That was something that was huge for me, because that played into being seen as lazy. You're never on time. That played into, you don't have respect for other people because you're always late. Right? And that played into my own stress that I put on myself. I remember having like almost full out panic attacks on the bus, because I'm like, I'm going to be late. Oh my goodness, I'm going to be late. And I'd be so hard on myself. And then I walk in the office or walk into the school and someone's always got something to say, right? So to be able to go back to school now and know what I could do differently so I wasn't late would be great. Now, am I still going to be late some days? Yep. Do I still struggle with my time management? Yep, totally. But I mean, I guess I manage it what works for me, but not other people. But again, it's that expectation that other people have on me and around me, right? So being able to realize, how can I change that? I can focus on my focus can be on what time I should leave, not what time I need to be there, right? So that was something that would have helped me to get to places on time. But even if I was to school on time, what I found was probably 11 o'clock, between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock is when I started, my brain kind of started waking up and could do the work. Again, this is what was my normal my whole life. But what I didn't realize was happening was, if we back up from being in the classroom to going to school to being back at home to up the stairs before I kick the cat to where I'm laying in bed, and we're seeing the night before what's going on. When I talk about sensory issues and those heightened sensory issues, we're talking about smell, light, noise, taste, all these things that you're going to have in all the different environments you're in throughout the day. That also includes when you're sleeping. So what I didn't realize, and people around me didn't realize, was maybe that little bit of breeze that was coming in the window was grabbing my attention. The way that the pillows felt, the sheets, the comforter, all of those things, even the soap that they were washed in, those smells could be physically uncomfortable for me, right? The way that the blankets felt could be too heavy or too light. The pillows themselves, they could be something that's uncomfortable for me. And when you have these sensory issues and you add on, what I call bubble trouble, where you've got all these bubbles inside your body constantly making you move all the time, when I lay down to go to bed at night, do you think there's an off switch? Do you think people with FASD can, look at their left shoulder and push a button and now the sensory issues have gone down and the bubble troubles, gone down? No. When we go to sleep at night, we're still experiencing those things. It was a partner of mine a few years back that said, when you sleep at night, you either have your legs like straight up in the air or you're constantly moving around. And I was like, really? Now I understand that I never got proper sleep. So that's why I was always so tired. And that's why it always took me longer to get going in the day. But it wasn't something that I chose to do, but yet I was labeled and punished because of it. Knowing now how I can make those changes, knowing how I can pick out the laundry soap that I can handle, I can pick out certain bedding that I can handle. I can find those pillows that I can handle and it's okay, right? It gives me a better opportunity to have a better sleep. We think about our brain, and if you think about it as a battery for, say, you use your cell phone, you charge that battery so that your cell phone's good to go. But what happens if overnight you don't charge your battery? How is it going to work in the morning? It's not going to work the same as other people's, right? That's the same thing with my brain and my body, was I didn't get to recharge them because I didn't get to sleep like other people. But those expectations were on me like they were on other people who got to sleep. I was expected to get up and, be calm, and I was expected to get to school and do this work, right? But I didn't get to sleep like other people. So that would be another thing that going back to school, I would be able to kind of do things differently because, like I said, I can now fix, my bedding and things like that, that I can help me to get a better sleep, right? For me, I wasn't a really big on medications and things like that, right? Because for myself growing up, a lot of times teachers would talk to my parents and say, maybe he has ADD or ADHD, or, maybe we should put him on Ritalin. And I was glad that my parents didn't, because for me, how is that kid that if anyone ever fell and scraped their knee, or if the teacher needed something, I was that first kid there to do that. I was that first kid to go help that kid that got hurt. And so I was always trying to help people and do these nice things. But then I'd sit at my desk and I'd be moving all around and wouldn't be able to pay attention. So what they wanted to do was give me medication to have me sit still. Now, if this is the wrong medication and I'm taking the Ritalin and I'm sitting still, okay, good. But am I actually understanding and absorbing what you're teaching? Am I processing it the way that's going to work for me? No. Now you've taken that kid that was so helpful and trying to support other kids and the teacher, and now I'm just sitting at my desk, but I'm quiet, right? So it's like, at what cost? Right? So for me, that wasn't the right medication for what I needed. Right? As I got older and I was able to find certain things that helped with certain areas of my life. Now, there's no medication for FASD, right? There's certain things that can help you with sleeping. There's certain things that can help with some of the physical issues, those kind of things, right? But there's no specific medication that is for FASD. Right? When it comes to FASD, it's learning about how the people around the individual can change what they're doing, right? How they can change their expectations, how they can change their environment, right? Change those things. That's how you help medicate individuals with FASD, is changing what you're doing, not changing them, right? Being able to look back at the experiences I had in school and things that worked and things that didn't, to be able to say, no, that's not going to work, or to be able to say, can we try this, would have been so helpful. I remember in school, things were really, really tough, and I just wasn't getting things done. I just wasn't really understood. But at home, my parents would do little things that really stuck out for me. One of the things that they did was at Easter time, they would have all of us kids go sit on the lawn. So when I say all of us kids, because my parents fostered over 70 kids over the years that they were doing that, they adopted 9 or 10 of us, and they had 2 biological children. And all of us that were adopted had varying disabilities. There's 4 of us with FASD. I had a sister with myotonic dystrophy. I have a brother with Down syndrome. I have another brother with autism. So there's many different varying disabilities in our home. But one of the greatest lessons that my parents always taught us was, it's not about your disability. It's about your ability, what you can do. And we focus on that. So just like in the word disability is the word ability, that's what we're going to focus on, is what you can do, not what you can't do. Right. And that was something that really stuck with me for years. One of those little things that, it seems simple enough, but was really a huge key for me as I got older. So here we are, say 5 or 6 of us sitting on the lawn, and we're just playing. And then mom and dad call us in, and we go in the door, and they give us a ball of yarn. And you have to follow your specific color ball of yarn. And it goes throughout the entire house, upstairs, downstairs, around tables, under chairs, over this, in a dresser, in the closet, like all over the house. And so then you're climbing around these things, or you're climbing around each other. And then you finally get to the end of your yarn, and there's the basket with all the Easter goodies in it. And then we all take our baskets and we all go outside to the front lawn, and we all dump them and then sort out who gets what, right? But it was something that just added to Easter. It made it fun. Right? Another thing is that I remember my parents would wake us up every once in a while, and we'd come out. And to me, it seemed like it was like midnight, but it probably was like 7 o'clock. I don't know. But on the table, there was KFC, there was McDonald's, there was like they went and got like 3 or 4 different fast food things and put them out on the table. And you're like, oh, it was like this big buffet, right? And I mean, it was pretty huge, because we didn't get a lot of that. When you've got 40 million kids in your home, you can't really afford to go get this kind of food all the time, right? So it was always like, oh, wow, this is special. And that's what I needed, was moments and times that were special, and moments and times that made me feel special. I needed home to be a safe place. School was going to be school, and it was going to be hard because I was going to struggle every day, wasn't necessarily going to fit in, and but to be able to come home and to be able to come to a place that you feel is your safe space, because you're not going to be judged, because you're not going to be told off, because people are going to have a little bit more patience with you and a little bit more understanding. Right? When I come home, it's not, okay, why didn't you put your boots away? Hurry up, do your homework. It was kind of like, okay, I was allowed to, kind of go watch a show for a little bit and have a snack, and then, just be able to kind of unwind from the day. And it was good to be able to have that place where I could step away from all this work that I had to do and just kind of take a break, right? One of the coolest things that's always stuck with me is, in our family, throughout the year, you didn't know when it was going to happen or who it was going to happen to, but my mom and dad would come in the room and they wake you up, and they're like, okay, come on, sweetie, wake up. And you wake up, and they put a Burger King crown on your head, and they would say, okay, you're king or queen for the day, right? And that meant you got to pick out whatever you wanted to have for breakfast. You got to go to the toy store and pick out a toy. Your brothers and sisters had to be nice to you for the day. The day was about you. There was a lot of time a lot of days that were about me, but this day was about me in a positive way. This day I was getting the attention in a positive way. I quite often got attention, and days were made about me, but they weren't positive ones. So to have this positive attention and feel like, I am special and you do see me, was so impactful. Like I said, it's always stuck with me. It's something that, I think is a great thing to do, because it's just one of those little things that I needed. I needed people to stop and say, hey, I see you, right? And I see how hard you're working and how hard you're trying. I remember the first job that I had where I actually had some success. I was working and my supervisor called me into her office and she said, hey, I just want you to know that you're doing a great job with these kids. The kids love you, the parents love you, the staff here love you. We just need you to make sure that you're getting to work on time, okay? But otherwise, you're doing a magnificent job. We love having you here. And I was like, okay. So then I would be on time the next day, and on time the next day, and then late the next day, and then late again. And 2 weeks later, get called in the supervisor's office, same conversation. Kids love you, the parents love you, the staff love having you here. We just got to make sure you're here on time, right? To be able to enjoy your time with you. And I'm like, okay, yeah. What was the difference between that situation and school was I was getting attention, but I was told at that job about what I did good and how people liked me, and then asked to try a little bit harder in a certain area. Where if I was late for school, I always heard about it. If I was on time or maybe even ahead of time, do you think anyone said anything? Nope. But if I was late, they always had something to say, right? Here, this supervisor was acknowledging what I was good at, acknowledging the good things I did and how people wanted me to be there. This made me want to work harder to get to work on time, right? And so it was really important for me to have that safe space, right? And as I've gotten older, you get the opportunity to kind of build your own circle of supports, right? And you kind of get to pick a little bit more of who you have in that circle. And if it's people that support you and understand you, and people that, they'll support you, but you don't feel judged, or you don't feel that you're a nuisance, they got to put up with me and deal with whatever it is, right? You kind of build those circles around you as you get older. And as we get older, I think we get a little more braver to say, you know what, I don't want that person in my circle. I went through that when I found my biological family. I believed that, they're my bio family, they'll love me, I'll love them, and it's going to be picture perfect. And it ended up being nowhere close to that. And I had to get to a point after years of, interacting with my family, to where some of my family members I don't have anything to do with. Some of them, the other ones, we talk once in a while, maybe on Facebook. And then there's some maybe that I'll see whenever I'm in town, right? I had to come to the realization, understanding that those relationships I could control, and that if they weren't healthy ones, I didn't need to have them in my life. It was so important for me to have a life where I have these healthy, supportive relationships that are going to help me thrive and succeed, right? And to be able to do things like September 9th, International FASD Day, it's awesome because I've invited family or friends out to when we did a FASD run, or we've done an FASD walk, or anything like that. And they're so happy and they're so proud of me. And it feels great to be supported and to have that attention on me in a positive light, right? because of my ability to take the things that I've learned throughout my life, to be able to look back and go, okay, so what can I learn from that? How can I help others see and understand things differently? That's helped me to get to where it's a lot easier and more comfortable for me to have the conversation about FASD. Right? When someone says, oh, I've heard about that, or what is that, or anything like that, it allows that opportunity for me to go, yeah, so it's very similar to other disabilities where, sometimes sensory issues, sometimes processing, memory, whatever it is, but you get those right supports and you build that environment around you, you can be really successful. And people are like, oh, okay, cool. Well, that's good. And again, that is taking what's going on and changing that conversation. Quite often we look at how do we change FASD? How do we, make it so it's not happening? And there have been years ago when FASD started to come to the forefront at conferences and things like that. I remember a lot of times there was very negative posters and things out there at these conferences and saying that, 80% of people with FASD will end up in jail, 70% won't finish school, or whatever it was, all these negative things. And I would look at those posters and I'd be like, is that what defines me? And I'd be able to kind of do a checklist of those things and go, yeah, I struggle with that. Yeah, I struggle with that, whatever, right? But I also wanted it to be like, but I've made it to where I have my own place and I was able to keep a job. And like, there were successes that I had because I found tools and strategies that worked for me, right? So when I'm getting on that bus, because I've realized I have to be at that bus at 8:07, not when I have to be at work, but I have to be at the bus at 8:07, I'm getting on the bus and I understand there are going to be people around me with different smells that are going to be touching me. There's going to be dinging, there's going to be lights, there's going to be all of this stuff going on. So I'm on the bus with my headphones, with music I picked out, with a hoodie that makes me feel safe and comfortable, with cologne that I sprayed on that I picked out so I can handle that smell, right? It's these things that I put in. These are the strategies and techniques that I put in place to be able to be successful, to be able to be on that bus and to be able to get to work on time, right? It's those things that we needed to start to look at. So in the beginning, when it was, it was almost like a scare tactic. We'll scare FASD out of society, right? And and that's not uncommon. We do that all the time. The news is full of like negative, bad stuff, right? And it's always focused that way. And we even look at smoking. I remember years ago, I used to smoke, but there was little images on the cigarette packs of like somebody's lungs or their teeth or whatever it was. And you'd look at that and go, oh my goodness, ugh. And then you'd open it up and you'd have a cigarette. Because we're so immune to that as a society. We're so immune to violence and anger and negativity and all of these things that we look and go, oh yeah, okay. And then we keep on going. And that's what happened with FASD. The thought process of we'll do it as a scare tactic so people won't stop having kids with FASD, that didn't necessarily work, right? And then we wanted to do certain campaigns as years went on, and one of the big ones too that we now understand well-meaning people were using and putting out there, but was having a wrong impact was certain things like FASD is 100% preventable. That makes sense. Okay, if we let people know if we don't drink, won't have kids with FASD, that's how we can help support and make that change, right? But what we didn't think about was the other side of the coin where people would look at that and go, well, obviously then, if that mother just didn't drink, her child that I'm caring for wouldn't have all of these struggles. She just chose to not drink, right? And it's like, oh, okay, wait, maybe we need to look at that one too and revamp that. So it's taking those things, but it's not necessarily saying that's terrible. Why would you do that? It was well-meaning people trying to do the right thing to make that change. And the change is, again, changing that conversation, talking about FASD. Because if we look at it and go, how do we prevent more kids being born with FASD in the future? Well, what about us that have FASD right now? Don't we, bring any importance to understanding FASD? And if you really want to understand it and make sense of it and know what's going to work or not work, who do you think the best people to talk to about FASD is? Maybe the individuals themselves, right? I am a strong believer in nothing about us without us, in the fact that empowering people within, individuals with disabilities to collaborate on, whether that's social media things like posters and campaigns, collaborate on studies and research and those kind of things. Because it was a group of us sitting at a table that started talking about physical health stuff. And it was like, I wonder if there's something here, right? It was the adult leadership committee that started looking at a sense of purpose for your life, and came out with another study, right? And so being able to have the opportunity to have our voices heard was so empowering and so great, because people started looking and saying, well, what do you think? What do you think would work? Instead of being at these conferences where I'm sitting there in the audience and I'm hearing, this is what they need to do, this is what they should do, this is what they need, and all of this, I'm like, okay, well, maybe ask me, right? And that is so simple, right? But can make such a big difference. If the teacher had said, why do you think it's hard to sit still in the class? And I'd be like, I don't know, I always think I am. And they're like, well, you're moving around a lot and stuff, but why is it easier now when we're just sitting out here talking? Well, then maybe I would have been able to say, well, there's not as much lights and noise and things like that. Oh, okay, so can we change our environment to equal success, right? Allowing us to be a part of that conversation. Sometimes it's going to be the simplest little thing. People are like, oh, we have to build this massive castle with 40 bridges and get some dancing unicorns. And then it's like, is that what will work? And it's like, no, a cup of water works too. So yeah, it's a matter of just talking to us and letting us have our voices to be able to say, this is what works for me. And one of the greatest experiences that I get to have is when I'm working with other individuals, whether I'm doing mentoring with them or running self-advocating groups, whatever it is, having that individual that goes, oh yeah, me too, that happens with me. And you're in this group of people and they have FASD and you have FASD, and you're like, wow. And then someone goes, you know what I do? I use these sticky notes and then I put them in my day timer, blah, blah, blah. And then someone's like, that's a really good idea. And that person's like, me? I had a good idea? I never have good ideas. I just do this because it works. And it's like, you just came up with a strategy. You came up with a technique that's going to help people with FASD. It's like, I did? Wow. That's the third piece. I talked about earlier on that routine and repetition, being able to implement those things for success. The third piece that I find for success with FASD is a sense of purpose, a reason to get up every day. And again, this is something that can connect with people whether you have FASD or not. We all strive to find our purpose, to find why we're here, right? What is that purpose for us? What do I have to offer? And when you're in those groups and you offer something and people look at you and go, that's a great idea. You're like, wow, no one's ever asked me. No one's ever given me the opportunity to say this or that, right? And maybe I do have, something to offer. I look at what I've been through in my life now, and I think, there were some great things about school. I love gym and I love drama and all of those things. They were great. But I also look back and go, I wish I had found my voice a little bit earlier to be able to make some changes and things like that. But knowing now that I have a purpose, knowing that the creator is using me to help educate and help support other individuals with FASD and help change that conversation in our society to be one that we have. We're not scared of talking about FASD. You know, we're going, okay, I have FASD. So now what? What does that mean? Right? Don't go, oh, ooh, we don't talk about that. Because by doing that, then you're just leaving me alone and unsupported. Right? Understanding that I had this ability to kind of take the things that I've been through or was going through and think about, okay, what's going on here? How do I feel? How can I share this experience and make sense of it for other people? Right? It gave me this sense of purpose. And I was like, okay, I have something to offer people. I have a reason to get up every day. So those three things, routine, repetition, and a sense of purpose. The other biggest sense of purpose for me was a little girl that came into my life 3 years ago, and that's my daughter, Alexandra. She is amazing. I love her so much. And yeah, she's my world. You know, we sometimes hear people with FASD can't parent, but what do babies thrive on? How do they succeed? That routine, you know, wake up at this time, they have this snack or this food, they play these games, you know, we do these same things. And there was this routine and repetition for her that as a father, it made it a lot easier for me to support her, right? And at the end of the day, it was like, okay, I have FASD, put that aside. I'm still her father, right? So can I love her and care for her and protect her? Yep, I can. And that's what the focus should be on, right? So being able to find that sense of purpose, whether that's your family, your friends, your work, whatever it may be. A friend of mine, he quite often will go into a phone booth and then come out and he's got this cape on and he saves the world. He thinks he's pretty super, whatever, but I mean, whatever it is that brings us that sense of purpose in our life, whether it's saving the world or walking a lady across the street because she is taking forever. So whatever that may be is so important for everybody, right? And so I want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about what FASD is, a little bit about my experiences, but also too to share in those successes that people with FASD have, right? How hard they're trying, and to be able to acknowledge that and look at FASD, September FASD month, September 9th, International FASD Day, as a day of acknowledgement, recognition, and celebration. So thank you, and I will pass it back to these lovely ladies here for the show.
Well, wow. Thank you so much, Miles, for this great insights and sharing your personal experience with us. I hope people have enjoyed this webinar. Well, I certainly did. And like it's already time and I didn't even realize. Yeah. And let's move on to the Q&A section now. And I would turn this over to the group. If you have any questions or any comments, please post it in the QA box. And I don't see any questions at this point, but we can wait for a minute and see if we get any questions.
And we can hand out my email too to the participant list. That way, if anyone has questions or anything like that later on, they can feel free to contact me then too. So
for sure. For sure. So, any question, guys? So we are getting some comments.
what are the comments?
Tammy says, I always love listening to Miles as he has so much good information to help others. Thanks again so much, Miles. Rachel Reem says, thank you so much. It says, thank you, Miles, for the great information on FASD. And Tracy says, thanks for sharing your story, Miles. Oh, we have a question here for you. Throughout the years, who was your biggest supporter and how did they support you?
Biggest supporter. Probably there would be two. One is my best friend. His name's Ryan, and we've known each other for years, but it's funny because his birthday is at the end of September. So quite often I'll go back to Calgary to visit him, and we, have the weekend where we do routine and repetition, the same thing every year. We get together and we watch WWF wrestling. We go to 7-Eleven and get Slurpees and candies, and we watch the same matches and say the same corny jokes, and but it's this relationship that we had where I could go to his house and we would throw the football around outside till 2 a.m. We would go for walks on the ridge with the Slurpee and just hang out and talk, and to be accepted just for who I was, right? And such a kind person to just have that relationship was really huge and key for me, because I even remember I met him when I was in the midst of my addictions, and it was always kind of a place where I could go hang and not be judged and not have to do, have these expectations on me. The other one that really plays a huge one is my brother Joel. He has Down syndrome. He's the cutest guy ever. We're really, really close. And every time I see him going into his room and he smiles and says, Miles, and he gives me a big hug, I love the fact that he loves with no judgment. He loves with no barriers, right? If I bring a friend home and I'm like, hey, Joel, this is so-and-so, give him a hug and be like, hello. Right? And it's that pure love and pure heart of a pure person that I think those two people have really helped me to see life differently and really appreciate things. And again, even Joel, he's got Down syndrome, but that's not who he is, right? Like he's got this disability, but he has all these things that he can do that just really make him stick out to me. And so, yeah, so I think those two are key relationships in my life.
Oh yeah, Sammy, you're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you, Miles. There's one more question. It's related to the diagnosis. So how challenging is it to get diagnosed, and what barriers exist that support or people can help with?
That is a great question. Unfortunately, FASD is the only disability that is not publicly or privately funded like other disabilities. And to get the actual diagnosis, it can be very difficult because it can range around anywhere around $5,000. And when you go through the assessment process, you're doing the different testing, you're meeting with different people, and then you have the meeting at the end of it where they go through what your scores were, and they're explaining to your teachers and your parents, and sometimes the individual sits in on these things. I really believe that it's important to have the diagnosis, but I really think we need to shift in the way that we are doing this. I think what would be amazing would be able to have an individual with FASD walking through that experience with the person. So, meeting ahead of time and having a coffee and just saying, okay, so this is kind of what the days are going to look like, right? And don't worry if you need to take a break, I'll be there too. We can go for a walk or whatever. I'll go out for lunch with you. And, having someone that is there to support the individual, but they themselves also have FASD, because there's a certain connecting that happens, right? And so then to be able to, after the testing and everything's done, to be able to explain what those different things mean. So when we hear, may have slower processing. Okay, well, what does that mean, right? To be able to say to the person, so that means that the people around you need to give you more time instead of being like, answer right now, tell me what the answer is. That is a great and easy way for the individual to learn about how they're going to learn best and what people around them need to do, rather than just sitting in the team meeting and hearing, he will have slower processing speed, blah, 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 and walking out of there going, okay, great, I have a grade 6 math education, you said, and I can't learn like other people, I'm too slow. Well, that's not a positive or good use of getting this diagnosis that can help you better understand yourself and better have people around you support you. So to have someone walk through that journey with you, to have someone be able to explain those things, I think would be huge, because I don't want to voluntarily go do a test that I'm going to fail, because I fail every test. And you want me to do this one that's going to show this disability that I can't do things. That's not really going to get people to buy in on getting the diagnosis done, right? It's important to have it. It's important to get that information. But I really think we could change the way that it's done so that people are getting a little bit more out of their diagnosis when they actually get it.
Soumya, there is also
And I'm again muted.
What's that?
I was muted again, so Anna was just reminding me.
there is also a question in the chat that Sarah asked, if you could take
Oh
it.
yeah, this we have to, yeah. So Sarah wants to know, do you experience being hyper focused, and what strategies help you socially when you are not paying attention to people around you?
I think sometimes it's the environment, right? So it may be hard to focus. I know if I'm sitting in a food court and supposed to be having a conversation with somebody, and there's people walking around and there's all this stuff going on in the mall, it can be very difficult for me to focus and to be able to continue on in that conversation and understand what I'm saying and what's going on. Because if you have processing issues, you need a little bit longer to process the information. But then if you also have heightened sensory issues, those things are going to be very distracting, right? And it's not that you're not trying to pay attention and you're not listening. It's just these things are too overwhelming, right? So being able to change the environment, being able to find a time that works, so say there's an incident that happens, and at that point, the individual is probably very heightened and, overwhelmed with everything. So if you start saying, okay, well, why would you do that? What was happening? Probably not going to be able to get the best conversation, but maybe a little bit later on, the two of you are walking through the park, just going for a walk and having a coffee, and be able to say, hey, so what happened this afternoon? Like, how did you feel? What was going on?
Mm-hmm.
You're not coming across as if you're judging them or telling them off or attacking them. You're just having this conversation. And it's a lot easier to go, I just get really overwhelmed, or I don't understand this, or I can't handle that clock. And it had nothing to do with Johnny. I wasn't actually mad at Johnny. It was the clock, right? Mm-hmm. So changing that environment, that it's easier for me to pay attention, but also allowing me the time to process what's going on. And sometimes it takes me no time at all to process the information, and other times it'll take a couple of weeks. So, looking at the environment and looking at what works best, and again, even asking the individual if they're able to, articulate enough about, I prefer
when we are over here doing this because it's quieter, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Miles, for answering all the questions and everyone for asking the questions. And yeah, so it's already 12 and we can wrap up this webinar. And before I wrap up, I just have a few things to tell everyone that, as you know, this webinar is recorded and it will be available on our website, Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, in a few weeks. So please feel free to share it with your friends or anyone who is interested in learning more about FASD. Also, I will be sending out an evaluation link and please help me out by completing it. And yeah, and once again, a very warm thank you to Miles for sharing his personal life experiences and your time today. And have a wonderful afternoon. And thank you everyone for joining for this webinar.